Just delete it, forget it, move on, next photo. So what's good, YouTube? In this episode, we're talking street photography tips. And to be more specific, it's going to be about overcoming your street photography fears, or if you're shy about starting street photography. Hopefully the tips and advice in this episode can help you overcome those fears and get out there to take photos. So to kick things off, I'll briefly talk about my path into street photography. So I started taking photos around 5 years ago. And when I first started taking photos, I wasn't really an extrovert and I didn't like going out taking photos of people and such. So I didn't really do street photography. And if you look at my early photos, it's more cityscapes, it's more landscapes, and it's more lookup and architectural type shots. And I only got into street photography when I became more comfortable taking photos, and I learned a few tips and tricks along the way that helped me overcome my own fears when it came to street photography. So to kick things off, let's talk about the main fear people have when it comes to street photography, which is when you're out there taking photos, somebody's going to turn around, walk up to you and confront you about the photos you're taking of them. So the first thing to say about this is it's extremely rare that somebody will come up to you and ask you to delete a photo or even confront you about a photo you're taking. In the 5 years I've done photography, I've only been confronted twice. First time was actually quite a funny one and quite random, but I was in Japan. It was my first day in Japan on my first trip there, and I was walking around central Tokyo in Harajuku, and there was one random guy on a platform and he was suited up and he was just shouting angrily at some people. I don't know what was going on, but anyway, I was walking around with my small RX 100 and I was taking photos of everything that day, and I took a photo of him as well. He must have seen me take the photo. He jumped down, started angrily shouting stuff, and all I understood was there were one or two English words he was saying, which was delete, delete. So I just deleted the photo and that was kind of it. We moved on, forgot about it. And then a couple of days later, I was speaking to some of my friends that lived in Japan, and they told me that the only people in suits that would be up shouting angrily and who would confront me like that would be a member of the Yakuza. So I don't know if that's true, if they're just exaggerating or joking, but that's just an example where somebody confronts you, and if you just delete the photo, the whole situation just goes away. The second time I was taking photos on the London Underground, I took a photo of one of the people working there. He came over, asked me to delete the photo, and that was that. So in 5 years, 2 people have approached me. Both situations were easily resolved by me just deleting the photo. So my main takeaway here is getting confronted about taking photos is rare, but if you do get confronted, just delete the photo, forget about it, move on. Don't get into an argument with the person, don't let your pride get in the way, don't get defensive about it. It's not that important. One photo doesn't define a photographer, it's about their body of work. So at the end of the day, that one photo isn't that important, and it's not worth getting into a conflict about or an argument about. Just delete it, forget it, move on, next photo. So second up, when it comes to street photography, some people think that you have to get up in people's faces, up close, in order to take photos of people and for it to be street photography. So a good example of this is Bruce Gilden, who is a New York based photographer, and he will just walk up to people with a gigantic camera and a flash and take photos of them in the street. Now that's one style of street photography, and I do like seeing those kind of photos, but it's not the kind of street photography I enjoy doing. And if you're nervous about street photography, it probably isn't the type of photography you should be doing. Instead, you can take a more relaxed approach and fish for your photos rather than hunt for them. Now what I mean by fishing is you find the location, you find a scene, a good looking composition, and you get yourself in position, you wait until the right subject walks into your frame, rather than walking around the streets and hunting down subjects. And to be honest, it's the type of photography I prefer doing sometimes, because you can be a lot more selective about your compositions, your backgrounds, your scenery, and then you can just wait until the right person walks into your frame, rather than just walking around sometimes aimlessly and just taking random photos of people walking past. One tip when it comes to fishing for photos, don't hold your camera to your eye all the time, because what I found is if you hold your camera up to your face, people won't walk past you, mainly because they're just being polite and they don't want to walk into your frame. What it means is your subject won't walk into the place you want them to. So just hold your camera down by your waist, and once your subject walks in the frame, just as they get to where you want them to be, pick up the camera, take the shot. Alright, so third on the list, what you wear and how you dress does make a difference when it comes to street photography. So if you are nervous or shy when it comes to street photography, you probably don't want to get noticed when you're out there on the streets taking photos. So there's a couple things you can do. Firstly, you want to remove any big bag, so don't leave the house with a gigantic camera bag on you. Nothing screams photographer more than somebody walking around with a gigantic camera bag on them. Secondly, from a safety point of view, depending on what part of the city you're in or what area, or in some countries, you may not want to scream the fact that you've got thousands of pounds worth of gear on your back. But also having a massive camera bag makes you more noticeable. So more often than not, when I go out to take street photos, I have no bag on me whatsoever. And if I do, it'll be a small sling bag or a side bag, just something to slip my camera into. Secondly, colors. So the colors red and yellow are the most noticeable to the human eye. It's the same reason why danger or warning signs are either red or yellow. As soon as the eye sees them, it captures the attention. So when it comes to street photography, avoid wearing those bright colors, avoid the reds, the yellows, and instead opt for more neutral colors. So blacks, grays, whites, things like that. Also, when it comes to your camera accessories, like your strap or your shutter button, avoid making those bright colors too. I see a lot of photographers stick the red shutter button on their cameras. While it does look cool, it also makes you more noticeable. So these are small details, but when it comes to street photography, I want to be as low profile as possible. As when I'm taking photos, I want the photo to be as real as it possibly can. And if the subject knows I'm taking a photo of them, that's going to change their behavior. One last point on the subject is body language. So when you are out there taking photos, if you appear nervous and you are nervous, the subjects and the people walking on the streets usually pick up on it. From my own experience, when I started doing street photography and I was shy and nervous about the whole thing, I'd often find that people would notice me taking photos of them. Whereas these days, as I'm a bit more confident going about my street photography, people hardly notice me, and it makes the whole street photography process a lot easier. So obviously, you can't just fake confidence if you are nervous and shy, but kind of ease yourself into street photography. Don't just put yourself into tough situations. Instead, as I said earlier, fish for scenes, get used to doing that, and then as you progress and get better with photography, get more comfortable with your camera, you'll be more confident when it comes to taking those street photos. Next up, stick to crowded areas. So when you're starting out doing street photography, or if you're shy and nervous about doing street photography, it's much easier to take photos in a crowded area rather than a quiet neighborhood. And that's simply because if there's loads of people around you walking about and moving, people are far less likely to notice you taking a photo. And secondly, even if they do notice you taking a photo, they're probably in a rush to get somewhere, or they simply won't care that you are. So stick to city centers or town centers where there's lots of people moving about. Public transport's another good idea because there's so many people coming in and out, so you always have new people to take photos of, rather than taking photos in your local neighborhood where you'll be the only person with a camera, making you far more noticeable. So before heading out to do street photography, have a few lines in your mind ready in case somebody asks you what you're doing and why you're taking photos. So for example, if somebody asks me why I'm taking photos, I just say I'm a local photographer and I'm documenting the streets. If you're in university, just say you're doing a university project, or just make up some sort of story, or just have the story ready in your mind so that if somebody does come over and ask you what you're doing, you have something ready to say. Another good idea is to have a business card which you can show people, or a small book of your photos, just so you can prove that you are a photographer and you are doing what you say you are doing. So my final point on this list is just to use some common sense when you're out there doing street photography. Don't take photos of people who are drunk, angry, or aggressive. They're far more likely to confront you about what you're doing, and the same goes for taking photos of certain situations which could put you in trouble or danger. Just don't do it. So yeah, use your common sense, don't get into trouble, keep things as safe and seamless and comfortable as possible. So that just about wraps it up. If you have any questions at all regarding street photography, just drop them down below and I'll make sure to get back to you. Or if you have any tips and tricks of your own, again, drop them down below in the comments. You guys can do me a massive favor as always by hitting that thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button too. But yeah, massive thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.